Chapter 12. The Road to the Circus. Castle de Moth to Lambington was a journey of just over 3 hours. The main road to the city, and indeed beyond, was known as the King's Eastern Highway, and it cut straight through the centre of Lambington. In the past, the King's Highway had always been a very safe road to travel. This time there were signs that perhaps everything was not well. They passed an abandoned cart, which by itself didn't mean a lot, but then they passed another, and this second cart had also been riddled with arrows, elven arrows. There was also a badly dented and pretty useless looking elven shield resting next to a tree, facing out towards the road. "Keep your eyes peeled," Sir Grant ordered. "There might be elves in the nearby forest." Reyes nervously began to study the trees as they rode past them. With his excellent hearing, he turned his head suddenly at every little crack and rustle. Seeing that Reyes seemed worn and slightly alarmed, Jenny rode over to him. "Calm down," she said. "That was an order to the men, not to us." "But what if," Reyes started. "When the elves see how many we are, I doubt they'll try anything unless they greatly outnumber us," Jenny told him. "There are only 24 of us," Reyes remarked, looking round at the cavalry that rode with them, while also surrounding them. "Yes," Jenny agreed, "but Sir Grant is a great knight, and the men with us are well armed. The elves won't attack." Reyes nodded and calmed down a little. "The order was just a precaution, lad," Sir Grant offered. "If any elves are nearby, I doubt they'd try anything, as long as they don't know who we're escorting." The journey proved to be uneventful, and soon they were within sight of the walls of the city of Lambington itself. The gates of the city were closed. Sir Grant rode up to them and knocked on the wood with his gauntleted hand. "Hello in there, a knight and entourage seek entry." And there was a little bit of movement behind the large gates. A face appeared for a second at one of the murder holes that had been set into the gate itself, and then followed the sound of the gates being opened. Sir Grant led the way into the city, with Reyes, Jenny and Anida following close behind, and behind them the 20 hand-picked soldiers of their bodyguard. It was here, just inside the northern gates, that Sir Grant turned to talk to the bodyguards. "Okay, we're here. I won't need you again for the next 24 hours or so. Feel free to enjoy everything the city has to offer. You may get drunk if you wish, so long as you sober up in time for our return trip tomorrow. We will meet you here at the gate this time tomorrow." There was a muted cheer from the bodyguards. It was nice to get 24 hours leave, but none of the soldiers had been expecting it, and few had brought much of anything with them in order to enjoy it. Reyes had never been to Lambington before. The place felt cramped, filthy and busy. So very busy. He had known a little of what to expect because Jenny had described it to him, but she had never mentioned all the crowds or the dirt. Lambington was the second smallest city in Floroth, but to Reyes it felt huge. The place stank of raw sewage as if it had just been dumped out on the streets. Then there were the sounds, both familiar and strange. Some he recognised from similar sounds he had heard at the castle, while others he didn't know at all. The loudest of all the sounds was a sharp, sudden rasping that repeated every 10 minutes or so and seemed to get louder as they moved further into the city. The market district was located near the centre of the city. The King's Highway led right up and through the centre of the market. Normally the stalls of the market would be set up on both sides of the highway, selling all manner of things from pots and pans to clothing and food. Today though, a part of the market was being used for something other than the selling of goods and produce. Most of the left side of the market square was currently dominated by a single huge wooden structure. People of the city were gathered around the structure, cheering and jeering, while a line of elves stood in front of it and waited their turn to climb the steps. The elves were chained and manacled, and there were soldiers standing nearby watching them. There were also soldiers standing at the top of the scaffold, one of whom was wearing a black hood. "I don't want to see this," Jenny commented as they rode past. "Can we move a little faster?" "See what, sis?" Reyes asked. Perhaps Reyes was naive, but he was still very young and had no idea what the spectacle meant. One of the soldiers escorted the next 5 elves to the steps of the strange structure. 4 of the elves climbed the platform with defiant pride, while the 5th had to be pushed up the steps. "They're catching so many elves at the moment," Anida commented. "It's a surprise they can keep up." "Don't," Jenny protested. Reyes tried not to watch, but it was hard. This was his first sight of elves. He didn't look as the trapdoor lever of the gallows was pulled, but he heard the sound. It was the rasping sound that he had heard all the way back at the northern gate, only now he knew what it meant, and it made him feel a little sick to his stomach. It was a noise that was going to follow him all the way to the southern gate, and maybe even a little beyond. The South City stables was located within 100 yards of the southern gates. The company left their horses in the care of the stable hands, and proceeded the rest of the way on foot. The circus was no more than 50 yards from the city. It was surrounded by a simple wooden palisade there to stop people from getting in without paying, and to demark the boundaries of the circus. The main entrance to the circus was located right across from the southern gates of the city. Sir Grant, Anida, Reyes and Jenny joined the queue. Being a knight of some standing, had he wanted to, Sir Grant would have been well within his rights to push his way through to the front, but he waited his turn along with everyone else. As excited as he was, Reyes couldn't help the nature of his legs. The walk from the stables to the circus wasn't that far, and yet, as Reyes announced with a moan, "My feet are already tired." "Not far now," Jenny assured him. Reyes tried to stand on one foot in order to rest the other a little, but it just made the foot he stood on feel worse without really lessening the tiredness of the lifted leg. "I hope they have plenty of places for people to sit down." "I'm sure they will," Jenny cooed. Stuck on the walls of the palisade, on both sides of the entrance, were posters. Mostly because so few people could read, the largest posters contained only pictographs using commonly recognized symbols for the circus. One of the smaller posters on the left side of the palisade, though, was more informative. "Welcome to the Beresford and Colony Brothers Circus. We hope you enjoy your visit. Please note that the circus has a wider range of amazing and exotic animals, some of which are usually considered dangerous. This circus has been given special dispensation from the Crown, allowing us to exhibit these creatures for entertainment purposes only. We have taken steps to protect the public safety. We are not breaking the law by having them, and neither can we allow members of the public to adopt them as pets." There was a man at the gate. He sat on a chair just to the left of the entrance. He was quite a scrawny looking man. By the look of him, he hadn't eaten in days, and he looked as if at any moment a sudden gust of wind might blow him away. He wasn't alone. Sitting just behind him, and just inside the confines of the circus so that he was protected by the special dispensation mentioned on the poster, was a very large and ugly ogre. The ogre wasn't armed. That would have been taking things too far. But the ogre didn't need to be armed. His mere presence was enough to stop anyone from considering trying to rob the gatekeeper. "What's the form?" Sir Grant asked of the man at the gate. "Yous pays to get in," the man said. "Yous pays for the games and the surfaces and for any food you'd to be wanting, but the ogling of the freaks is free." "How much?" the knight asked. "It's an impressive show as we has freaks here as you won't be finding no places else," the man commented. "How much?" Sir Grant insisted. "5, the man responded. There was a short pause, and then he added, "Each." Sir Grant pulled out his purse and handed over a single coin. The coin was worth 20 archror. The archror was the smallest denomination of coin used in the realm. The man took the coin happily. He checked it quickly for authenticity and then dumped it in a small sack at his feet. Satisfied that the entrance fee had been accounted for, the man looked directly at Sir Grant and said gleefully, "Welcome into the circus." Beresford and Colony Brothers Circus was more of a freak show than anything. There was no big top, no clowns or ringmaster, just 3 aisles of sideshows, freaks, and places to buy food and refreshment at unbelievably exorbitant prices. They even charged for water. The very centre of the circus did contain a number of tents and trailer homes, but these were the sleeping quarters of those who worked the circus, and were listed as out of bounds to the customers. Ray staggered past the entrance gate, his feet feeling as if they were going to drop off. He turned to Jenny and told her, "I'm sorry, sis. I'm going to have to sit down for a little while." "Tired already?" Sir Grant commented, surprised. "We only just got here." "Oh well, there are some seats just over there by the wyvern cage. Take all the time you need." Anida looked anxious. It was clear from the expression on her face that she didn't want to hang around and wait for Reyes to recover, but at the same time she wasn't about to say anything. Jenny recognised the expression on her best friend's face, and as Reyes made himself comfortable on the seat the circus had provided, she suggested as a grant, "Why don't you and Anita go ahead? Enjoy yourselves. I'll stay with my brother and we'll catch you up once we're able." "I don't like to be a bother," Reyes offered. "Go and have fun. I'll be okay soon." Sir Grant seemed doubtful. "Well, if you're sure." "Go ahead," Jenny replied. "We'll be fine, and we promise not to leave the safety of the circus without you." "Well, okay." Sir Grant still sounded very hesitant about leaving them. Reyes could understand the dilemma. If anything did happen to the Duke's two children where Sir Grant was supposed to be looking after them, it could only result in dire ramifications for the night. Sir Grant took one look at his daughter and made up his mind. He bowed formally to Reyes and Jenny and then disappeared with his daughter into the nearby crowds. Jenny took the seat next to her brother. In the cage directly opposite was the Wyvern. There was a notice on the cage in writing large enough that it could be read from where Reyes and Jenny were sitting, as long as there was no one in the way. "They claim it's the only Wyvern in captivity," Jenny commented, as much to herself as anything. "Oh?" Reyes replied. He was more bothered about his feet than the creature in the cage. It was quite a proud-looking creature, though, almost black in colour, with massive wings on its back, stuck in a cage that was barely big enough to contain it. Jenny was shaking her head. "The elves have a regiment of Wyvern riders, you know. Only about 20 of them, but they exist. I think they created them to show their harpies that they weren't indispensable." "Harpies are more flexible," Reyes commented, sticking his feet out in front of him and trying to flex the tiredness out of them. "A Wyvern rider would have to dismount and find a place to house his steed at the end of the day. A harpy is, well, self-contained." "True," Jenny commented. "I guess." Reyes sounded a little forlorn as he changed the subject back to his feet. "Why do my feet tire so easily, sis?" "Don't worry about it," she replied. "I'll stay with you." The Wyvern wasn't the only thing that could be seen from these seats. When the crowds were thin enough, he could see what appeared to be a coatl in the next cage, but between that cage and the Wyverns was a sort of sideshow. People were playing a variant of the show game and losing vast amounts of money. Jenny, noticing that Reyes had gone quiet, glanced over that way to see what he was looking at. She commented, "Some people never learn." She turned her attention back to the Wyvern and leaned back against the seat. "Want to practice your Elistran?" she asked in the Elvish tongue, her words slow and deliberate. Not really in the mood," Reyes replied, about the same uncertain pace as his sister, and tripping over the first word a little as his mind switched gear. "Not sure I feel comfortable using this tongue in public." As he spoke, Reyes turned his head to face his sister. Suddenly, their immediate vicinity burst into a terrific show of light. It took a second for Reyes' eyes to clear before he could focus again. "Sorry," someone said. "That was a little closer than I intended." It was one of the strolling mages dressed in the typical clothing of a circus mage, so that the paying guests would be able to pick them out easily from the midst of the crowd. The mage bowed before Jenny and Reyes, and a moment later produced a bouquet of flowers, seemingly out of thin air. He handed the flowers to Jenny, saying, "Again, I do apologize." He glanced to Reyes and back to Jenny, indicating that the apology was intended for both of them. "That's okay," Jenny said graciously, taking the flowers and smiling. "No harm done." The mage then turned back to Reyes and said, "That's an interesting talisman you're wearing under your top. May I see it?" "What talisman?" Reyes replied, puzzled. "I did say I was sorry," the mage uttered defensively. "We're not angry with you," Jenny said diplomatically, "but certain things must remain our secret." "I see. I think I understand," the mage said, a little puzzled. "Secret?" Reyes replied, feeling a little bit irritated. This wasn't the first time he had felt as if he was being kept out of some family secret. "What secret? What talisman? What are you two talking about?" "Nothing," Jenny replied. "Nothing to worry about." Sis, Reyes complained, elongating the word a little. Well, I'd best get on, the circus mage commented with a jolly air. You two have fun now. Don't let the harpy shoot you. Harpy? Reyes stuttered, suddenly interested. Just a joke, the mage replied. She wouldn't really hurt a fly. She's at the end of the aisle showing off her skill with a bow. Reyes glanced that way quickly, but there was far too much activity between there and here to see anything clearly. He turned back to the mage and told him, Thank you. The mage bowed and left. And a second later he could be seen mingling with other members of the crowd and amazing some visitors with a simple light show. A harpy, sis, Reyes said, and looked excitedly at Jenny. Then he felt a little embarrassed. He couldn't help it, but he had strange feelings when he even thought about harpies, feelings that he felt were wrong. Also, Jenny didn't seem all that keen. We really ought to look for Sir Grant and Anita. I guess, Reyes replied, though with a crowd this big, maybe we should just keep an eye out for them as we wander around. We'll miss most of the circus if we spend all our time just searching. Okay then, Jenny said with a sigh. Let's go and see this harpy. Really? Reyes asked hopefully. Anita knows how you feel about harpies, Jenny commented. She and Sir Grant might even be waiting for us there. Reyes blushed at the thought that Anita knew about his fetish as well. He wondered if either Anita or his sister knew just how deep that fetish ran.